All right, I want to welcome everyone to Hot Off the Press, a show about new releases and the people that bring them to us. This week, we've got the editors and some authors for a new anthology, Predators and Petticoats. So as we start, let's go ahead and go around the horn and get you to introduce yourselves. We'll start with you, Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily Leverett. I co-edited Predators and Petticoats. I'm also an author and a medievalist English professor. My most recent work on my own is The Wolf in the Cloister, which is a historical medieval paranormal romance about a woman and a guy that spends 3 days a week as a wolf.
All right, and Margaret.
Hi, I'm Margaret McGraw. I am a co-editor of Predators and Petticoats. Emily and I have worked together on two other anthologies about the Weird Wild West, one called Weird Wild West, one called Lawless Lands. And we've also worked on a benefit anthology called Chasing the Light to support a writing group member of ours who died very unexpectedly in 2016. And I also write short fiction and longer works. None of the longer works are yet finished, and too many short ones unfinished. But I have a website called writerspark.com about prompt writing, based on prompt writing and starting stories. I say every good story has to start somewhere, and I'm clearly better at starting them than I am at finishing them.
All right, thank you. Rod.
Hi, my name is Rod Belcher. I write under the name RS Belcher. I've been writing full-time since 2012. At present, I think I have 9 novels out, and it's been a good year for short fiction. Last year, I was involved with Predators and Petticoats, Galactic Stew, which is another anthology, and I also got to publish a couple of short stories with Amazing, which was like a dream come true. That was really cool. Last thing I had come out was a Audible original book I did for them called The Queen's Road, which is urban space opera. I just created a new genre. But urban space opera. It came out as a audiobook from Audible in December. John Hartness with Falstaff is releasing it as a analog book in next month in June, and we're also releasing the 4th book in my Golgotha series, which is Weird Wild West, which I was very fortunate to work with Emily and Margaret on the original Weird Wild West anthology. So that's what I got going on right now.
All right, thank you. Vince.
Well, hello there. I'm Vince Carpini, coming to you live from Montreal. By day, I work for Big Pharma, and by night, I, like Margaret, have too many short stories going with far too many unfinished ones. I do not have any longer works in the works because I don't right at present have patience to tell a long story. My stories all seem to tap out right around 5,000 to 6,000 words, which suits me just fine. The most recent thing you can find me in is an anthology called Clockwork Dragons. My story, The Other Side of the Air, is about a lady who uses Tesla coils to open a portal into another dimension and has a thrilling adventure. And I hope you will check it out on Amazon. And I'm very pleased to be part of this panel, and I'm looking forward to what comes next. Thank you very much.
We're glad to have you. And Jessica.
Hi, I'm Jessica Levai. I have a story in Predators and Petticoats. I have a PhD in Egyptology, but that was another life and 8 years of the adjunct shuffle ago. So I've been writing full-time since, 2016. Mostly my publications have been short stories. My most recent is, it's not really a story, but it's a guide to preparing a supernatural advance directive, which was on Tor.com back in April. And in the spring, God and coronavirus willing, my first book will be coming out. It's a vampire romance, shut up, in Pushkin sonnets. And that's coming out from Lanternfish Press in spring of 2021. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So, and I too am happy to be on this panel. Thank you for having me.
All right, thank you. Now let's jump right in first. And talk about a little background on Predators and Petticoats. Margaret?
Yeah, so at DragonCon in 2016, I was on a panel, and to be honest, I couldn't tell you which one or who most of the other participants were in the blur that is DragonCon. But somebody said the phrase Predators and Petticoats, and I said, that's an anthology title. And somebody else leaned back and said, I'm in. And by the end of the convention, I think I had 4 committed authors. And I came back and I told Emily about this, and she said, sure, I'll edit it with you. And that was off to a running start. You know, it really came together that easily. And it really is, I think all of my anthologies so far are the offshoot of convention hall conversations. So the question of whether or not conventions are, you know, useful and in professional development, for me, that definitely has been the case, as certainly as an editor, for sure. And certainly through convention life, let's see, Emily and I have become con besties. Rod, we met through Weird Wild West, actually. Rod was invited to that anthology as our one of the anchor authors through our publisher, but since then we have met at several conventions. Really enjoyed getting to know Rod better, and was delighted to invite him to join us for this madcap adventure. We kept it very open as to the theme of, you know, predators and petticoats. There's an implied feminine and predator. What is a predator? And I'm gonna, with that, suggest that I toss the baton over to Emily because we had a lot of interesting conversations. I never thought it would be such a difficult thing to decide what is a predator, what constitutes a predator in these stories.
Yeah, we agree about 300 slush stories. But Predators and Petticoats, we sort of started with okay, well, clearly this implies female. We did get a fair number of stories that were from a male point of view about a horrible woman that they were dealing with. And I should have been able to predict that we were going to get some of those. But we did have conversations about what is a predator. Like, do you have to kill something to be a predator? Do you have to kill something innocent to be a predator? Do you have to eat it, or do you have to hunt it? Or how does it, you know, where are we going to draw the line and what works and what doesn't? Because there were a couple beautiful stories that just didn't quite make it. That just weren't quite predator stories. And lots of authors have stories that they will repurpose, and I don't mean that in a negative way, for anthology calls that they see. So that happens a lot, where there's one that just maybe, but maybe not. But yeah, we ultimately decided that a predator was something that killed things, whether or not it was in recovery, like Jessica's character is trying not to kill things, but very much can kill things, or a professional killer of things like Vince's story. So there was a broad range of that.
We, yes, and the point of view, as Emily mentioned, one of the things that we did not require that the predator be the primary character, but had to be the focus of the story, right? And a couple of our stories were voices of characters that were not the predator, nor preyed upon. And Rod brought us a wonderful story about, you know, people who are confronted by, or find themselves in a situation with a predator and have to deal with that.
Okay, and you said petticoats kind of implies feminine. Was there any latitude there?
We specifically wanted female characters, you know, and again, this was not, and not in the current social construct of, you know, binary gender fluidity, but just generally speaking. And as you know, Emily mentioned killing, a lot of our discussions were around, you know, a predator could be a character who, for whom the hunt the thrill that they have to have that, right? You know, and I have a lot of natural history, interest in natural history. And so I was looking at it from kind of a biological perspective, you know, and the predation that you see in nature, you know, but in human character, it could be someone who really is a cutthroat deal maker, right? Someone who is a stock trader, someone who is the bargain hunter extraordinaire. You know, we hoped for a broader variety in that sense. But I think the most difficult choices that we had to make in terms of choosing Slush were some of the stories, as Emily mentioned, where the story or the main character wasn't really a predator, or maybe, for instance, you know, a couple of stories that we had in the theme where someone was sort of exploding out of a situation. But when they got out of that situation, there was no implication that they would continue doing what they did, right? Whereas one of our stories is about a becoming story. To my mind, it's one of the most tragic stories, but it is about it's a becoming, but you see the intent and the compulsion that that character will carry on. Right. So just like we had so many conversations about what is it to be a predator, what makes a predator, what drives them, you know, as well as sort of what were the points of view. We wanted to give that breadth of different points of view.
Okay, great. And now that we've got a little background on the anthology itself, I understand you guys crowdsourced the anthology. Can you walk us through that? How was the process? You used, was it Kickstarter?
Yeah, Kickstarter is Kickstarter. It's like, the process is both fairly simple and it takes a while to do. And the mechanics can be a little clunky in it. But once you get it set up, after that, it's fine. I think the most difficult part of crowdsourcing is visibility. And that's one of the reasons why we really wanted all of our authors to support the project as much as possible for the Kickstarter. Because it would really be awful for an author to get accepted and then us go, Kickstarter, sorry. You know, but having authors all over the world, because when we went through Slush, that is what we ended up with, certainly helped the Kickstarter. But it is visibility. And we did use a few popular and big name authors to help us get that. And I think you would be somewhat hard pressed to successfully run a Kickstarter. We wanted right around $9,000 was our aim. And we went past it, but it would be difficult to do that without at least one anchor author, I think, or a really hugely famous editor. And awesome as we are not that.
You are to me. I think you guys are famous.
Legends
I
in
remember.
minds.
I remember obsessively checking the Kickstarter like every day, like continuously refreshing. Like, did we make any more money? Did we get any more money? Did we get any more money? It really is. And then in like the last week, things started taking off, and I was like, "Holy crap! This might actually happen. This is so exciting."
Yeah,
but up until then, it was nerve-wracking.
Yes, for all of us. So Emily and I, again, this was our third Kickstarter together with different publishers. And we had gone through the experience a couple of times. We had learned lessons each time, including this time. And in the process, as Emily said, it's not rocket science. It's a fairly straightforward process. You know, the platform isn't super easy, you know, but you know, you can sit down and figure it all out. And the key is having those people who will, both the people who will consistently plug it the entire time of the Kickstarter, and also then those couple of big names who have enough of a following that they'll sign up, you know, when they do finally make their push. So but I have to say, all things considered, the Kickstarter process really was nerve-wracking. And certainly, of course, we would love to have, had it mushroom and go way over and everything. But really, we knew what we wanted. We achieved that goal. We went a little bit over, gave us a little bit of grace to do a couple of extra things. And, we're really pleased with the outcome of that process, all told.
Yeah, for some reason, I never worried about it, and I don't know why. Lots of other people.
Someone has to be calm.
Yeah, I was like, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Like, there were some people involved. They were like, it's not going to be fine. Like, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. And then it was fine. I was like, see, it was fine. Like, all that worry for nothing. But yeah, I mean, our anchor author, Seanan McGuire, who has an amazing story in the anthology, like, towards the end, tweeted about it. And I think her tweet was something like, I really want to be in this anthology, so you need to go out and support it. And there we went.
Done.
Yeah.
That pushover that we needed. And you want to talk about, it's creative, and if you have good ideas, people will want to, and that's true, but people also want something that they know they're going to enjoy, and that means anchor authors.
If you look at reviews of anthologies, and it's true for our Weird Wild West ones too, Rod's fans bought because they knew his story. He had a story in it. So they said, okay, I'm going to buy it because I know that I'm going to like his story and I want to support this author. I think one of the exciting things about social media today in general and crowdsourcing, and the reason it works, is because fans have the opportunity to feel like they're contributing to see something from their author. And so they feel like they have a more personal stake in it. And that's kind of a thrill. I mean, it is for me as a fan when I support anthologies, which I frequently do. These are my unread bookshelves. Except
I
for
see the Chicago Manual of Style there. No one's read the whole Chicago Manual of Style.
That's just and reference. I read pretty much all of the MFA though. I think for those, again, that's one reason that the anchor authors are so important. It also is, I think, important for for people who are considering contributing to the slush to have confidence, one, that the overall product will be good, and two, that they will be joining a strong group of voices, a strong group of stories, and an overall, product that they will be proud of, that they could be proud that their story is part of. And so for people who were making the choice, like Jessica and Vince, to contribute stories to Slush, that we're just thrilled to see them, and theirs quickly rose to the top. But we had 300 submissions and 20 stories, and so about 10 slush, right? I mean, there's just such a very small percentage that you can choose. It doesn't matter if you have 100 fantastic stories, you can only choose 10 of them, to go in. So it can get really tough at the end to make those decisions. And that's, again, something Emily and I have found we work very well together as co-editors, coming up with that final formula.
Because we have slightly different tastes, and so we're good at balancing this kind of story versus that kind of story. We had a couple extra slush spaces because we took flash fiction, and we got some good flash fiction too.
Yeah.
So that was nice.
Which we had not done in the past, and that was really, it was a nice change. And the flash pieces that we included, we have 2 technically flash and 2 shorter pieces that are sort of on the verge, and the 2 that are actual flash, right, under 1,500 words, are both wickedly funny. And I think they provide a little breath of fresh air, a little light, sort of dark humor note among some of the heavier weight stories. And a couple of the stories are uplifting, I think. They're not all doom and gloom. Despite the fact that these may be predator characters, again, that doesn't mean that they're evil. That doesn't mean that they're bad or wrong.
Some people sometimes need killing.
There you go. And sometimes people channel their interests or inclinations in ways like one of our characters is actually a marshal, and she is both a predator and a hunter of bad predators, right? And we see that she is a hunter, but she also is a good guy. And so, yeah, I mean, again, it really was kind of across the board.
All right, great. And you mentioned something about the readers wanting to have kind of a stake in an anthology and anything they read, which is the whole point of the crowdsourcing. I understand there were some, rewards that involved them.
We did, and actually, I'd love to give our authors more time to talk about their stories and their choices. So Vince, so let's see, one of our specific author, in fact, our highest level reward was for the backer to choose which of Rod Belcher's storylines, which of his universes that he would write his story in. He was willing to give us the flexibility for a backer to make that choice for him. And so that went, I think the first day, one of his fans paid and actually paid over, contributed more than that level, which was
I didn't know that.
Yes, which was so generous.
Wow.
And and that person was great to work with. But they chose, and then Rod wrote a story. Rod, can you talk a little bit about what that was like, and how that was for you as the author?
You guys were the first people to ever ask me to do something like that. Well, at RavenCon one year, they asked me to do a Tuckerization for the auction, and I ended up. It ended up being two people that work a lot with the convention who have been friends of mine forever. And they ended up being pretty major characters in Brotherhood of the Wheel. So they got kind of their money's worth for that. But I'd never been a goal in a crowdfunding kind of thing. And it was very flattering and pretty neat. I would love to someday find out who did that. But I do have a lot of folks that I interact with on social media that are just really nice people, and they really seem to enjoy the books. And I try to be really appreciative of that because they're taking time out of their life to read something of mine. So it's kind of awesome. But it blew me away that it went the first day. And I didn't know that they gave more than what you guys were asking for, which even that kind of blew me away. But I really enjoyed working on the anthology, and it gave me an opportunity to do something I haven't had a chance to do before, which was kind of build on the mythology from one of the series of books I've got. The backer wanted me to write a story in the Brotherhood of the Wheel universe, and just very briefly, it's basically urban fantasy. It's centered around the highway system. The main character is a truck driver. There's also a state police investigator, and the Brotherhood is basically the secret society that protects the highways. And the highways, for some strange reason, attract disturbed personalities and genuine monsters, real monsters. And it turns out it has something to do with the ley line systems under the ground, and how somehow or other the highway systems seem to be set up to work with the ley lines. So it's a secret society of just kind of ordinary people who run into all this weird stuff on the highways, which if you've ever traveled long distance on the highways overnight, totally realistic. So so the story I did for you guys was a short story that took place right after the last Brotherhood novel, which was King of the Road, which I think came out like 2 years ago, something like that. And it's centered around a truck stop. I think I'm trying to remember now, it's been a while. I think like in Mississippi or somewhere like that. It's a truck stop that two of the main characters pull off the road to get something to eat and stretch their legs, and they end up involved in this huge thing. And the other thing I kind of wanted to do was the title of the story is Lot Lizard, which is a derogatory term for sex workers that frequent truck stops. And I kind of wanted to put some light on on those people and their lives and kind of the struggles they have as well. So it's Predators on kind of two different levels. And it was a lot of fun to write. And you guys were so encouraging and very supportive, because I am pretty much late for everything, always. And you know, my kids give me crap about this all the time. My editor that I worked with at Tor, Greg Cox, Greg was super and great, but he'd just be like, hey, how's that coming along? Hey, just checking in. So you guys were wonderful about giving me the time to do it, because I was kind of doing it in between a couple other things that I had to get out the door to. And it was a lot of fun. I had a great, and it was really flattering to think that there were people who were willing to like throw down money to pick the universe. And I have fairly strong female characters in pretty much all the stuff I write. I was really kind of surprised, because I thought someone was going to pick Maud from Golgotha books, from the Weird Westerns, because I got to do a whole novel on her, which was Queen of Swords. So I was kind of half expecting that. But it was kind of neat to work with Lavina and with Max, because those two characters, I really love them, and I love the way they interact together. And it was just a very fun experience. And I'm very excited. I've been trying to kind of remind folks to, because a lot of the Brotherhood of the Wheel folks have been very excited about it. And I've had a lot of folks asking me, where can I get it? Where can I get it? Where can I get it? So I'm going to try to push some more traffic that way for you guys. So, you know,
Thank you.
But thank you for asking me to jump in and do it. It was a pleasure. It was a lot of fun.
It was fun to edit.
All right, just one more question for you, Rod, before I move to the other authors on their stories. If you had one of your other universes picked, would it have been the same story, or would you have adjusted it for the universe?
I would have. Funny story. So I said, yeah, I'll be glad to do it. And they're like, okay, we're gonna let someone pick what universe. I'm like, yeah, okay. And I'm working on other stuff and I'm starting to see the deadline creeping up. And I'm like, hey, what universe am I doing this in? And I think the person who had bought that goal dragged their feet a little bit telling you guys, or I forget what it was exactly, but it was, so I had like 2 or 3 ideas kind of bouncing around in my head, but I couldn't really use the same story. The universes are pretty different. The Nightwise books and the Brotherhood books are set in the same universe, and it's all urban fantasy, but they have pretty much different whole different casts of characters, but they mention each other from time to time. So you're aware they're in the same universe, but and the Golgotha universe is completely separate from everything else, and it's like late 1800s, Western stuff. So I had a couple of ideas, and actually I hope one of these days to do those short stories too, because I think they would be fun. But no, I was just kind of like going, okay, all right, I'm ready. Whatever it is, I'm ready for it. And
that was all me, Rod. I take responsibility for any delay. I appreciate you've got my back.
it worked perfect. It worked fine. It worked great. But yes, it was kind of like I was sort of waiting for the trigger to get pulled to see which one to do. But the other 2 ideas I think would be really cool stories to do someday. Maybe if you guys do another Weird Western thing.
It's down the line. I will hit you up. Absolutely.
Anytime.
All right, let's go ahead and move over. Jessica, tell us something about your story.
Well, my story came out of, I made a decision that I was going to try to get into opera. And 3 years later, I am still trying. My character has a line about loving everything about opera except sitting through it, and that's kind of where I am right now. I mean, I tell people that I love the stories and I love the costumes and the occasional devastatingly handsome man. So from that, I just started writing a story, and this is, yes, one of those obnoxious, the story just came out of me things, but in this case, it's true. At least half of it came out, and then I just stared at it, and I'm like, okay, these characters are cool. I don't know what's gonna happen. And a few weeks later, I figured it out. So it let me bring a little bit of opera and backstage stuff into it. It's a 19th century story because, well, the costumes are just great. It let me bring a little bit. My mom was born in Hungary, so I could bring some of that heritage into it, and that's like the most exotic thing about me. So could sell that. And so when I did have this story, I had this story written before I saw the call for Predators and Petticoats. But I remember I saw it. I'm like, yeah, this is where I should be submitting this story, and it turns out it was.
Yeah.
So and Vince, what you said about watching the Kickstarter every day.
My F5 button is worn down.
Yeah, it was kind of like that, but I really wanted to be a part of this, and I wanted to share my story and see what other people came up with too. So that
just has one of the best titles. And that was one of the first things that Emily said to me was, "Oh my gosh, that title." And also just a truly lyrical writing style. That you can, so it does. I think it has a sense of music inherent in it. So really, really beautiful, Jessica, and we're so pleased to have it.
I stole the title. It's the translated title of an aria, and I can't remember the Italian to save my life. But for somehow the opera, The Power of Fate by Verdi. It's about as opera gets because it's Verdi. But I remember reading through synopses of it and listening to them like, wow, this actually does describe my character in this. I think I'm just going to go ahead and take this aria and I'm just
there you go. I think I'm
put that
pretty
over
sure
there and go.
Absolutely.
All right, Vince, how about yours?
I wrote a story called The Lesson of Shafter, which is a Weird Wild West story. So I am extremely happy that Rod's fan did not choose Golgotha, because I would have been going up against him and that would have been very, very bad for me.
No.
Maybe. And mine is a story about a monster hunter named Emily who has a talking horse and is struggling to bag bounties and also be taken seriously because it's 1867 and people don't think a lady should be shooting monsters. I wish that, like Jessica, I had given myself weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks to work on this. I found out about the open call 2.5 weeks before it closed by accident while doing something else. I was inviting my friends to a party, and one of my friends, who's also an author, named Blake Jessup, he's very good, look him up on Amazon, said, I can't make it, I'm on deadline, which is a thing he says a lot. And I said, hey, I totally understand. And he said, well, you know, Vince, you should be on deadline for this too. And he sent me the link to Predators and Petticoats. And I said, oh, that's awesome, but I don't think I can write something they'll want to buy in just 2 weeks. And God bless him, Blake said, well, not with that attitude. So so I was like, right, challenge accepted. And given how little time I had, if I had been super smart, I would have Googled Emily and Margaret and discovered that they edit weird Westerns. And then I would have written a story that was a weird Western and named the main character Emily and directed my story at my editors. But I didn't do that because I'm not very smart. What I actually did was I spun my wheels for 3 days trying to come up with an idea. And then I remembered that I had 1,000 words of a weird Western that I had started and abandoned. We talked about this earlier, 6 months earlier. And I was like, oh, here's a starting point. Thank God, because I don't have very much time. And almost none of that survived into the final story, but it gave me the emotional boost and the psychological boost I needed to actually make an attempt. And it turns out it was 100% worthwhile because the final product I'm really pleased with, and I'm tickled that it made it into Predators.
And you did a Tuckerization for it too, right?
I did. An email went out at one point, I think, from Emily saying, we have one more Tuckerization that needs to happen, and you can include any of these names. And I was like, oh, I 100% know that guy. Like, I played video games with him on Xbox Live almost every day for a year. I know exactly who that is.
Revenge.
So, yeah, well, not even. He was a good teammate, Rod. And I just wrote back, I said, Emily, I know this guy. I want very much to put him in my story. And she said, that's wonderful. And I worked on it. And I made a reference to the fact that he's going bald, even though he's quite young. And when the book came out, he did send me a messenger note via Facebook that just said, you son of a bitch, which was what I literally told Emily. I think this is how he's going to respond. And so I was delighted that he did so. As I said before, when we were offline, that curse was meant entirely with love. But that was fun. I had worried that, you never know if you're going to be asked to do a Tuckerization, but I was wondering is this going to be awful and awkward? And it turned out it worked out about as well as it could be, because it was somebody I knew and I wanted very much to include them anyway. So in that sense, it was a total pleasure.
Is it the guy in the cave?
No, it's
the mayor's assistant.
It's the mayor's assistant.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to keep it short and sweet.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff is not, in fact, a terrifying mountain man, so I didn't go that far. The man in the cave, Ben, is deeply strange, and I wanted Jeff's inclusion to be amusing, but I didn't want him to think like I was trying to tell him something. So I just left it as like a cameo, Stan Lee in a Marvel movie style, and then we move on.
It really, Vince did a perfect job with that Tuckerization, and again, all we required was the name, and because he knew this person and took it in hand and gave a really charming and actually adapted just that one little scene. And it only took a few sentences, a couple descriptive lines, and changed a little bit of the sort of the action to give that character, which had been a nameless character and not really described, really gave that character a little bit, momentary spotlight. It was absolutely perfect. So thank you so much, Vince. Really enjoyed that. And I'm so glad to hear that the backer was appreciative as well.
That's how men sometimes show love. So that it worked out perfectly.
I suppose someone should say, just in case, a Tuckerization is when an author puts the name of a person in a book, and generally speaking, it is either the name of a person who is asked to be in the book or a person had asked for a particular name in the book. Because some people may not know what a Tuckerization is.
Yeah, and somebody had asked in the course of the project, somebody asked, well, where does that come? Tuckerization is such an odd phrase, right, or an odd word. So it actually is based on an author. I think it's William Tucker, who was known for adding people that he knew in his stories. And it has become, in particular, a convention, sort of a standard. I think Rod mentioned that he had maybe done a Tuckerization for RavenCon, which is a Virginia con. And so oftentimes those are given as charity auction offerings that an author will say they will include a Tuckerization for someone to buy at an auction. So that's a kind of a standard thing these days, and very common in the speculative fiction writing world. So I don't know how broad it is outside of this environment, but certainly pretty common within it. So thanks, Emily, for bringing that up.
Yes, thank you, Emily. Now, I'll start with you, Jessica. Why do you submit to anthologies?
Well, I'm trying to think of the reason deeper than in the hopes that someone will like my story and buy it. I submit to anthologies. I submit to online journals. I like anthologies. I like the book nature of them, that there's usually something solid that comes out of it. And those can be, a little easier to get people to read sometimes. I know I submitted to this anthology because I thought I had the perfect story and it just sounded really cool. Yay, paper book.
All right, and you, Vince?
Like Jessica, I too write in the hope that someone will give me money for my work. That would be awesome. They often don't. That's the short story That's the short story gig. You know, you send out a lot of stuff and you build up a deep folder of rejections and a commensurately thick skin. In this case, I submitted to this anthology in large part because essentially I was dared to do it. And I mean, I decided to take it up. And once I got going on the story, it was one I very much wanted to tell. Speaking more generally for anthologies, one thing I love about them is the breadth of stories that you can get. You know, a book like Predators is a perfect example that there's so many different takes on this approach, on this title, on this theme, and so that no two stories feel alike. Jessica's story is lovely and it stands entirely apart from everything else in the book. I cannot for the life of me write like in first person, but I have deep respect for people who can. So within one paragraph of Jessica's story, I was like 100% sold on this. Like, I want to do this. And when I read Rod's story and realized that I was basically reading about the Magic Highway Patrol, I was like, yes, that is 100%. I'm down for this. And this is a great book for that because you flip the page and there's something new and fresh and exciting. And that is something that you can only really get in an anthology format. And I think that makes it very appealing. And also stuff is sort of bite-sized. You can read a couple stories, put it aside, and if you forget about it for a week, a month, a year, you haven't lost your place. You can just pick it up and start a new tale, and I think that's very, very cool as well.
Yeah,
To build on that, I like the breadth of monsters in something like this. I remember as soon as I saw the word Leshen, I'm like, okay, I know what a Leshen is. This is going to be cool because I don't know how many other people do, but it's a video game nerd thing.
Yeah,
and
I had no idea. I had to go look it up. And I actually, most of the references I found on Google were a D&D monster, but it got the point across. But yeah.
Yeah, I watch my husband play a lot of video games is actually what it is. So like, I know what a Leshen is. I want to see what this author does with that. So I found that very interesting. And of course, some very human monsters in this book.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
Yeah.
That little girl who sets fire is way scarier than anything else.
She's the becoming one that I was talking about.
Yeah,
and my heart breaks for her. Every time I read that story, my heart breaks for her.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
She's, I think that one's called A Good Daughter, I think. And
yes.
Oh man, that one
yes.
was, I have two little
it's
girls. And I put that story down, I looked at my kids and I was like, I'm going to have to keep a very close eye on these two.
Be very careful what you teach.
No matches for you.
Yeah. But I mean, that's also a part of it is we try for balance. We try for stories that aren't the same. And that's one of the things I've said over and over again when people talk about, okay, I want to submit to an anthology. Like, you have to understand, if you submit a vampire story, we're going to get 15 of those. And if one of our anchor authors is doing one, we can't take a story that's like theirs because we want 22, 23 different pieces. And so it's not don't write vampires. It's if you're going to write that, it's going to have to be the best vampire story I have read in a long time.
Or the most different.
I edited an anthology where a woman sent in a story late. We lost it and it ended up in a spam folder. It was like 4,000 words too long. And we were like, I was like, fine, we'll just read it. And like, the co-editor, I edited The Big Bad with John Hartness, read it, and he's like, you have to read it. And it is one of the best vampire short stories I have ever read, period.
Wow.
Ever. So I mean, like, it happens, and that was Slush, and just, and there it went. But variety is important, and we spend time thinking about, like, the order of stories as well, so you don't go from, horrifically depressing to horrifically depressing. Tragedy. Like, we try to interweave them so that they speak to different things and in different ways. So
it's like making a mixtape.
Yeah, exactly.
Or a playlist. Okay. Sorry, let me bring something to the 21st century.
Wow, that's totally good. I like that better.
Yeah,
a mixtape.
All right, Rod, how about? Oh, sorry, Emily.
I was gonna say, both of the stories and a lot of the stories in the anthology, one of the things that they did was teach me something new or give me a new perspective. Like, I didn't know anything about opera, and I had to go look up what a Leshen was. I'm more familiar with the Wild West simply because I've been a part of both the anthologies, but that matters too. The moment of I've never read this before, ever, matters.
All right. And Rod, how about yourself? Why write for anthologies? Especially you said 3 universes out there that you're, I'm sure, having your readers wait with bated breath for.
That's actually been it's a problem, and actually it's 4 now, because I just started The Queen's Road, which is, I'm hoping that Audible is going to buy something. They're making noises like they're going to buy at least another book, but I'm hoping the whole thing would be 4 books at present, and I'm hoping they'll buy a couple of them at least. But so yeah, the more different things you start writing, series wise, the further apart they start getting. So I'm kind of glad the Golgotha book that's coming out. This is number 4. Queen of Swords, I think, came out in like 2016, 2015. So it's been a while since anybody's got a new Golgotha book. So that's a challenge. And you would think that would kind of keep, and it does, it keeps me pretty busy. But the thing is I'm kind of fickle. And I like, if you write, I don't know how someone writes just a series and that's all they do is one series, book after book after book after book. I have to jump around and do different things, or else it just gets really old. And short fiction was where I started. The first thing I ever got published, like legit published, was a Star Trek short story for Simon & Schuster. And it's because it's a different thing. It's a different discipline. It's a totally different thing. When you have a novel, you've got some time to kind of, you are sort of obligated to set the table, and it's usually kind of a slow burn, a slow build, and you have a lot of different characters you're dealing with, and you're trying to weave all this stuff together. Short fiction, it's not down and dirty, but it is get the story, get it, get the premise down fast, build the characters, and it's just a totally different, like almost like a different set of skills. And I really find it more challenging. It's funny because I started out doing short fiction, and then I guess I got lazy or something. I got to writing books, like novels, and it is fun to kind of like, say, okay, I got this many words. What true story? I'm trying to remember which anthology it was. I wrote this, I was in the middle of writing this story, I was on deadline, and it turned out that I had like 5,000 less words than I thought I was supposed to have. So I was either going to be turning in this big gargantuan thing to the editors that was way over their word limit, or I was going to have to like really, not quite junk it, but I was going to have to like do some very serious remodeling to it really quick. And all that's challenging, and it's fun. And Margaret and Emily are, every time I have seen them at a convention, every time we've worked together in the past, it has been a joy. It's been a pleasure. And this was no exception. And I literally, if they said, hey, we're doing this anthology and we need someone, one of the authors needs to donate a kidney. Could you give us a kidney? I'd be like, well, I think I still have one that works halfway decent. So, okay, you can
It
have
would be a stretch goal, Rod.
one, and I'll keep the one.
Rod, I promise right now, I will never, ever, ever ask you for a kidney.
For an anthology.
That's my
Okay,
bar.
because I've got debts, and I've already got somebody who's got that one of them locked down. So, I can't really,
But you're on for my next 2 or 3 anthologies, dude.
Oh, I love doing them. I really do it. I enjoy them a lot, and it is so neat to see going. When I'm traveling, I usually take, like, I've been going through at some used bookstore. I picked up this huge collection of it's like the greatest science fiction stories ever written or something. It's by Isaac Asimov edited it, and it's really good stuff. So I'm working my way through those, and whenever I travel, I take one of them with me, because with anthologies, like Vince was saying, you can like read a chunk of it and really enjoy it and get something from it, and then put it away until the next time you get a chance to pick it up. with a novel, you do that, and it's like, what was going on? I don't
Mhm.
remember. I gotta go back and read 3 chapters back to remember what was happening. So, it's like a whole different set of skills and almost like a whole different mindset for anthologies than for novels, and I love it. I enjoy doing it, and some of the people, just the people that you see their work, and it's so amazing. Because it's like you'll see somebody, like a couple of folks in the Star Trek anthology that I was in have gone on to write a bunch of Trek books and other stuff. And I've met some really good friends through anthologies, really, really decent people, great writers. And it's always, I really enjoy it. It's always a pleasure. And it's very different it's refreshing. It's different than writing a novel.
All right, thank you. And kind of playing off that, how challenging it is, I want to throw this out to anyone that wants to answer. I'm not going to go around because if you have an answer, great. If not, or I guess I should start, writing to a theme, does that impact you in a positive, negative? Do you see it as a challenge? Do you see it as, oh, that's tying me down? What does that do for you?
Could I speak to that, if you don't mind? I just finished up doing a story for Galactic Stew for that anthology, and that was a lot of fun to work on as well. And I do think that sometimes when you're doing a novel, you have your kind of your plot summary, and you have a pretty good idea of where you're starting and where you're going to end up. And then you have this. It's like all the long work. Basically, you're dealing with the same thing, the same themes for 3 or 4 months or however long you're writing the book for, and it's kind of fun. Sometimes in my case, my experience has been every time that I've done an anthology, the theme actually usually kicks something in my head loose that I hadn't even thought of as a story idea. So that's always, I think they're really kind of fun. It's almost like it's like those little mints they give you at Olive Garden that are so delicious. And, it's like you've been eating all this pasta and oh my God, so much pasta. And then there's more pasta and you have to take the pasta home, and then you get this little mint and it's like, oh, this is delicious. And it's so different from the other things. So yeah, I really have enjoyed some of the stories I'm most proud of writing have come out of anthologies for that very reason, because basically it was like a writing prompt that I wasn't really expecting. So
and when we talked to Joshua Palmentier about the Zombie Needs Brains anthologies, which Galactic Stew is one of them, that seemed to be one of the most difficult ones I would think to write for, because the idea is it has to have food as a central part of the story. If you take the food out, the story falls apart. So yes. To be able to write to that prompt right there tells you something.
The story I did for him was called Tender, and it was about a food delivery service for monsters. So basically it was from the point of view of the driver, of the guy that's delivering this food. And it turns out the reason that, well, I guess I shouldn't spoil it. Sorry, Dave. Sorry, Josh. Sorry, Dave. But basically, it was a huge amount of fun to write. But yeah, it was like they invited me to do it, and I was like, food. And I'll be honest, first thing I went to was cannibalism. But then they literally said in the description, no cannibalism. And I was like, oh, come on. But yeah, that was a tough one, actually. It took me a while to figure out something to write for that.
I remember that call. I tried, and I came up with a whole page of one-line things, and I just couldn't get any of them to pan out. I'm a writer who appreciates. I like having restrictions on my writing. I mean, I wrote a book in sonnets, so yeah, and I did it because it would be easier than prose, swear to God.
Wow.
But I don't know, for me with anthologies, sometimes a call works and sometimes it doesn't. I remember I wrote a story for an anthology once because one of my fellow writers said, I'm going to write for this because I think a good writer should be able to write to spec. And my response was, a good writer should be able to write to spec. But I did it. And I came up with a story for that one. So in that case, it did work. And it may even get published. So I don't know. I find that more often I have more luck when I have a story that is close, finds a call that where they seem to work together.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, or not. It's early. I'm not committed to anything.
I think almost all my short publications have been writing to something. I've written a few outside, but my favorite short story is in Athena's Daughters 2, and it's called The Last Two People on Earth. And it was a strong female character, so I wrote about an elderly woman who would smack you with her cane if you called her elderly, who owned the last grave on Earth, and a very rich man was trying to buy it from her because humanity had spread out among the stars, and they still all considered themselves Earthlings. So Earth was a massive graveyard, but not in a depressing way. Like, it was a monument. So the only people who had graves were people that were born there. And she was accidentally born there because her mother was an academic and pregnant and had a baby early. So she is literally the only person. And about the interaction, these two people who are close to the end of their lives, and what they're fighting over may or may not actually be a hole in the ground, right? That it's more about that. But that came from that prompt. And I like to write to specific things. Some of it is a part of me that's like, I don't want to waste a bunch of time on something no one else will read. And that's not reasonable, because that's how you learn to write, is to waste a bunch of time on something other people won't ever read. But this, I've also found, has been true for my academic career. I've published a lot from knowing people and meeting people and going to conferences and, oh yeah, that's really interesting. Hey, literally it was about cannibalism, actually, in a book about flaying.
It all goes back to cannibalism.
Oh yeah, this guy gets flayed in this one romance I work with, and she's like, oh, will you write an article for it? And I was like, sure. She's like, great, you have 2 months, because like he'd set it up like months ago. I was like, okay, but so I find those constraints often very useful. And I ended up writing an article on Neil Gaiman's use of Shakespeare in The Sandman, because A.J. Hartley is a Shakespeare scholar and knew me and knew I was interested in stuff like that. But I met him at cons, not conferences, because I'm a medievalist, not a Shakespearean. We don't go to the same, we don't hang in the same circles.
Never the twain shall meet.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I really like the opportunity to write. But I mean, I've had lots of things where I've been like, I could totally write for that, and ended up with a page of first lines. It was like, not going to happen.
All right. And let's go around and let everyone know what you hope they take away from either your story or the anthology as a whole. We'll go ahead and start with you, Margaret.
Gosh, the anthology as a whole, I hope that people will have different ideas about what some things that we assume at the beginning. We get a little bit of information, and then when we get more, it can be very different. So maybe build a little space to get the whole picture before we make judgments about people, and recognize that there's often more to the story than is first apparent.
Great
answer. All right, Jessica.
I'm not sure how to top that one. What I hope people get, well, I hope people enjoy my story. I hope that they enjoy the writing. And I hadn't thought of this, but maybe they'll even learn something about
love of opera.
About opera and about sibling relationships, especially in the arts. I mean, I grew up in a creative family, and artistic rivalry, sibling rivalry, monsters or not, those are very real things. So that's what I hope people take from it.
All right, great. Rod.
to be honest, I think the thing it's always, it was really great to kind of advance the Brotherhood universe and kind of give folks another little story out of that universe. And I didn't really start out meaning to do this, but I do hope it kind of gives some insight into the life of folks who work in the sex industry, that maybe that'll open some people's eyes to how difficult a life that can be, what will drive someone into that life, and if it just maybe makes a few people who should feel uncomfortable, good. And if it maybe makes a few folks who are just kind of ignorant or unaware of any of that, aware of it, that'll be good too. So I wasn't trying to like moralize or preach or anything like that. It just kind of grew out of the story, and those characters just kind of popped in there, and I'm really glad I had an opportunity to do that. So I hope people will enjoy it and get something good out of it.
Great. And Vince?
Gosh, there's been some really good answers. I'm going to sound like a schmuck here, but like Jessica, I hope people enjoy the story that I wrote. If anything else, I hope that people reading this book, speaking as a slush author, I hope that people will use the stories that they find in this book and that they enjoy as an excuse and opportunity to seek out some new favorite authors. Jessica's great. Or me, that's fine. Whoever, whatever you would make cool. So that would be wonderful if that just means that some of the slush authors get even just a little bit more exposure. That would be wonderful. I just want to point out that this is not an anthology that pays an exposure. They gave us actual, like, real, honest to goodness American dollars. Thank you so much.
We wish we could give more.
Thank you very much. And so if people want to throw some exposure on top of that, that's magnificent. And I just hope people come out of this and just enjoy the stories that we've told. And if that happens, then I feel like we have succeeded.
Great. And lastly, Emily.
Yeah, I just want to say we're very serious about paying. People die of exposure. And so, like, that is what the bulk of the Kickstarter went to, was paying people, including us, but paying authors and trying to get as close to a professional rate as we possibly could. But one of the things that I hope that comes out of this is there are so many different women in this anthology, so many different ways of looking at women and looking at the way that the world looks at women. Shannon McGuire's story very much highlights the way that a massive group of women in this country live every day that most people don't talk about. And very much like Rod's story, like, it shines a light on things that are uncomfortable to deal with. And it's on the shorter side for a story, but it's incredibly powerful because of the way that she looks at and deals with and reverses victim roles. But we have all kinds of women, good, bad, happy, unhappy. We have some great family dynamic exploration. There are a fair number of sibling stories. There are some love stories, so it covers a whole lot. So I do want people to be entertained, because in a lot of ways that's our first job. But the stories all speak to something, and no two stories really speak to the exact same thing, and that variety is good. And so I hope people find a favorite story, and I hope that some of them are made uncomfortable in good ways. I mean, we read scary stories to be scared. We read emotional stories to be emotional. So I hope that those connect that way. And it is also part of our project in everything Margaret and I have worked on together to insist on slush, to insist on giving people the opportunity so that we can get people who don't have a big name next to people who do, so that they will get exposure. Not just that, but they will get that. They will maybe find an audience who discovers them. And also, a truth of the industry is it's a lot easier to get in when you have one credit. Just one. Yeah. Because then somebody else has vetted you. And so by trying to find authors that need that first credit. Like my first things were working in short stories and anthologies, and that gave me a publisher eventually, like that kind of step. And so I do hope that the authors get benefits out of this as well.
Absolutely.
All right, great. And it was kind of asked previously, is there a second Predators and Petticoats possibly in the future?
Do it. Do it.
I don't know. I would never say no. Emily and I really enjoyed when we did the Weird Wild West anthology with Misty Massey. Sorry. We had so many terrific stories. We knew that we could easily do another one. And Lawless Lands came out of that and is still a strong seller today. We've talked about the idea of doing another Weird West. Some point we may do that. You know, there's so many great stories out there. You know, there's always, I hope that people will keep looking for homes for them, and certainly hope that we will continue to provide homes for great stories like yours.
Yeah, I mean, I keep saying, like, I'm pretty firm, like, I need to not do anthologies because I've got other stuff to do. So I imagine that I'll have a Kickstarter out next year. That is how these things work. I don't know that we would do another Predators. I certainly would. I can't imagine that at some point Margaret and I won't do another themed anthology. There will be something else, and it will be someone will say something bizarre at a convention, and we'll go, there it is, you know, because that's how it happens.
I already have, I have authors now who will say, hey, what's your next anthology? And I'll say, oh, well, I'm thinking about this, that, or the other. And they'll say, oh, I'd really like to do that. And I'm like, well, I'll put you in my file.
Yeah.
So as soon as I'm ready to do this one, I'll hit you up.
Very cool.
All right. So lastly, go around and let people know where they can find you. Start with you, Jessica.
Best place to find me would be my website, which is Jessica Levai, Levai.com. That's got links to my Twitter, and I've got a newsletter, so that's the best place to check my stuff out.
All right, great. And Vince?
You can find me on Twitter at Vince Carpini, Carpini, and on Facebook at the same name, although my Facebook is private. But if you just say, hey, I saw you on that thing, I'll probably add you. I'm not really too picky. And otherwise, you can also find me on Amazon's Author Central. And on that note, please, if you read Predators and love it, please leave us a review on Amazon and on Goodreads. The AI feeds on these things. Please feed the machine.
Absolutely.
And Rod?
You can find me at my website, which is rsbelcher.net. You can find me on Facebook. I've got a family page, like my normal page, and then I have an author page, which is author RS Belcher. And I'm on Twitter, same thing, author RS Belcher. I think that's it. And what Vince said, please, you have no idea that after cash and you know, shout outs, the best thing in the world is a review. If you can throw out a review, take 5 seconds to do it. It means an awful lot to authors and editors as well. So, but yeah, you can find me at rsbelcher.net.
Emily?
I have been blessed with a distinct name, so it is not hard to find me if you just remember Leverett, Leverett. My website is emilylavinleverett.com or emilyleverett.com. Both will get you to the same place. I'm Emily_Leverett on Twitter, Emily Leverett author on Instagram, but Instagram is mostly cat pictures. Just what I do on
pleasure.
And I have a Facebook page as well. And like Jessica, you can find everything at my website. And I have a newsletter that I have just recently gotten up and running. That includes a free short story if you sign up for it. That's in the Changelings Fall universe, one of the universes that I write my novels in. It is a vampire story. But yeah, that's pretty much where you can find me. Also on my webpage is my academic work. I mentioned Neil Gaiman, but I do most recently a lot of work on Terry Pratchett and how he uses medieval romance. So it does actually align the medieval and the spec fic, and all of it kind of comes together. So if you're interested in that, I just edited a collection of essays we call anthologies of short stories in the fiction and in academia collections of essays, but about Terry Pratchett and things like that. So you can find that there too.
That's coming out next month, I think.
Yeah, it's the academic world. I have no idea when it's coming out. It's got a pre-order, but
So Amazon says it's coming out next month. It's Macmillan Publishing, so that means who knows what.
yeah.
For those of us who know anything about academic publishing.
Yeah, the Shakespeare one's supposed to be out in August too from Arden, but you know.
All right, and finally, Margaret.
As I mentioned, I do have a website, writersspark.com, that is primarily promoting prompt writing, which, as we talked about a little bit, I let others speak about that, is a passion of mine to get people to start writing. I'm most active on Facebook because I'm using that as avoiding finishing my stories.
All right, great. And you can find the book on Amazon right now?
Yep. Absolutely, in Kindle and print form. It's available on Amazon.
All right, great. I want to thank everyone for coming. I want to thank you guys. A great panel. And we'll see everyone next week at the Hot Off the Press. Bye.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great evening.
You too. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.